wasn't Mary 12? So Mary never had any sexual relations. That's the classical Christian belief. That's a biblical belief as well. If people ever hear that Mary had other children, that's a relatively very new idea. Biblically and historically, the early church never believed Mary had any child other than Christ.
Whoa. The Bible specifically mentions Jesus had brothers and sisters. James was his brother.
Give me one moment. Let me just answer this, and I'll touch upon that. Where it says Mary was 12. I think either 12 or 14. She was supposed to have been very, very young. But either way, the overshadowing is meant to talk about the glory of God, not an actual sexual act occurring there in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 1. Yes, you're right, partially right there. It does talk about the brothers and sisters of Christ, but there's a major problem with that. Many other areas in Scripture, you hear of brothers and you hear of sisters. That's just a generic way of speaking of people that are either related to you in one way or people that are living under your household. They can be cousins. It's very common to use that terminology as we live in Texas. In Spanish culture, you see it in Mexican culture very often. Now, how is that the case in the Bible? You're talking about the Gospel of St. Mark, and where in Mark, and you can go to it right now, Mark chapter 6, you have the brothers listed, James, Judas, Joseph, and Simon, and then you read about the sisters in Mark chapter 6. The thing is that we're told that they're brothers and sisters. The Greek term is adelphos for brother, the masculine, adelphe, the feminine, the Greek. And then it tells you how they are the brothers and sisters, Jim. It then follows it up by saying they are, related. They're kinsmen. They're syngenusin is the Greek word. That literally, so there tells you they're brothers, but how are they brothers and sisters? Then it says they are kinsmen. They're related. They're likely either cousins or related in some other way. But when it then identifies how they're brothers and sisters by using that Greek word, it eliminates the possibility of them being children of Mary, because that Greek term would never be used in that way.
Would you consider that a minority opinion? Do you admit that that's an outlying? That's an outlying opinion.
Not even close. Nope. Your opinion would be the minority. If you look at the massive majority of Christians, billions of them, even if you look in Islam, you don't find any of the apostolic churches believing Mary had children. Catholic, Orthodox, toss in Islam there. It's even the very first Protestants believed Mary remained virgin. Martin Luther, John Calvin, Zwingli, Francis Turretin. It isn't until you get to the late 1800s, close to the 1900s, that they begin changing their theology in that regard. So it's actually, we hear of it a lot in Texas and other parts of America where they believe Mary had other children. But by and large, it is a real minority position.
Jonathan. It's the official Southern Baptist position, the Southern Baptist Convention's position, that Jesus did have brothers and sisters, literal brothers and sisters through Mary. The Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant organization within the United States. We might be having a sampling bias going on here as far as that goes.
Okay, what do you mean by yeah, I agree with you, the Baptist, but then again, what of the other Protestant denominations? Lutherans don't believe that. What about Anglicans?
William, I'm not sure if I was specific enough. I was agreeing with you.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
And I will do the same. Let me throw you a bone too, Jonathan, William, because we know, we can infer from the New Testament that Joseph was quite a bit older than Mary. And those could have been stepbrothers. He could have already had them from a previous relationship.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a good point there, Jim. And I remember when I was in Dallas with you, Jim, and I was after the debate, we began talking about an early document. And in that early document, in fact, we did a whole show on it. In that early document, it does indicate that the community believed Joseph to have been an aged man with children from a previous marriage. So I do think that is a good point you bring up.
Yeah. Is it reasonable to assume that a married, they were only engaged when Jesus came around, Joseph and Mary, correct?
Okay. That's a great question.
We assume that they got married. Is it reasonable to assume they never, why would Joseph have never wanted to get busy? I mean, really?
So that is a really good question. So number one, it is the likeliest case that in ancient Jewish culture, you would get married and you'd have children, without a doubt. But you find examples through Jewish history of people getting married and living celibate lifestyles. You have an example in the book of Numbers, chapter 30. Then, if you look in Philo of Alexandria and Josephus, early Jewish historians, you have examples of people living chaste lives even after being married, lives where they're devoted to God in the temple. Very different culture from the culture we have today. The person asking the question, Jim, is correct. Mary was betrothed, was essentially Joseph had a right to her already, but Mary's language indicates that she had no intention of having any sexual relations when the angel appears to her and says that she will be found with child. She says, "Let it be done unto me according to thy word." So very different. We believe as Catholic Christians that Mary's role was to be there serving Christ her whole life. So we believe the Holy Family was very unique in that aspect. So we believe that they did, that they're a very different example, very different kind of family. But you can find other examples throughout Jewish history of people getting married and not having relations.
The phrase "Joseph had a claim to her" still is gonna
well
feels like I got punched in the stomach there for a second.
You got to remember the time period as well, though. So it's a very different time period to today. When I say he had a claim to her, I don't mean that he literally owned her. I mean he could have had relations with her during the betrothal period. So he could have had sex with her, but we clearly see that they were not having any relations at all.